Hello everyone, it is Mike Levin, January 31st, 2021, second video today. The first one is uploading in the background, cross my fingers, on my now old iPhone XS Max, which was the flagship phone a couple of years ago, because they've been through the 11s and the 12s now, and so I'm probably somewhere like 4 years behind. However, it is now, I guess, with the latest operating system upgrade to 14 point something, I don't even know what it is, 2, 3, it is able to multitask when you allow an app to run in the background. So there's a permission thing, and that's nice, and that was nicer than it was during the Amiga days. You can now say whether programs can continue to do their thing in the background or be put into a frozen state. So if you allow YouTube to do its thing in the background and you start an upload from the native YouTube software, I guess it's not native, but from the regular, from Google YouTube software on iPhone XS Max as of right now, it seems to be able to continue to upload that video in the background even while you're shooting new video in the foreground. And I had been unable to do that since my Android Note 8 days, Samsung Note 8. I was on that amazing hardware platform that came after the Note 7 exploding scandal. And so, you know, people who really followed and believed they knew such things had said to me, this line is dead. The Note line cannot survive them exploding, this lithium-ion battery problem. And I was skeptical. I loved the Note platform. I was not on the 7. The last Note I had was the 5, which had the odd hardware design of the Galaxy, a strange, almost convex feel to it. I guess they were trying to go as opposite to iPhone as they could at the time, and they tried to make that a Note model. And that phone was my primary phone for a while, until one day while walking the dog, I was stupidly using my phone. Phones are stupid. And the dog lunged, and the phone dropped out of my hand, and the screen cracked. And I said to myself, you know, look, the Note experience is not getting better. This 5 model that felt like this weird Galaxy version, anti-iPhone, was not the sleek, flat tablet profile, hardware footprint that I had fallen in love with from the Note 3, which I was on. So I jumped on the Note bandwagon after Note 2 when it had stabilized, and like, oh, that Note 2 looks nice, I'll be on the Note 3, which was greatly the same, you know, very 2001 A Space Odyssey obelisk, you know, solid, you know, rounded corner monolith design that, you know, was awesome. It was one of the things people loved about the Note platform, an unopinionated, rounded corner, rectangular design. It was in the Note 2. It was in the Note 3 that I was on. It went away in the Note 5, as did my phone, through a dog walking accident. And then I was sitting back watching the Note 7 debacle unfold and going, oh, this beloved platform where the stylus is like a Wacom pen. That's the thing about these things. For people who like to doodle, the Note platform from Samsung was like a dream come true, because it was like the 4096 levels of pressure sensitivity resolution in a tiny little tuck-away stylus that pushed into this already perfectly contoured phone shape. And it got really weird on the 5. It returned to normalcy on the 7, and then it blew up. So I said to myself, look, the time when things are really best is when you have a basically competent company that understands and realizes it made mistakes, buckled down, and deliver more value than the money you're going to be putting into it because part of the deal right now is continuing to be a loyal customer in order to keep that note line alive. And you're really giving the Samsung company something by saying, despite what happened on the 7, we trust you and we're going to give you our money for the 8. And the 8 model was everything that was glorious and wonderful about the Note platform, particularly the black obelisk design, which by this time was almost like feeling like a chunk of sci-fi dark matter in your pocket. It was really, truly awesome. And the thing unlocked from a keyboard, from a fingerprint reader on the back. It could also do retina scan, not the 3D face stuff of the iPhone. There's a few different face eye scan recognition things going on for unlocking phones, which I think is generally unwise. And I think it actually was ironic that the mask movement from, it's not a movement, the imperative, the public health imperative of wearing masks came along while all this facial recognition software was in play for unlocking Apple iPhones, not so much the Samsungs and their retina scan, which would work either way, with or without a mask, and in fact had that extra proven technology of the fingerprint reader as an extra thing. You really were not excessively dependent on any one phone unlocking mechanism. Oh shoot, as I was shooting my video here, I blew right past the exit I was supposed to get off at. And now I have to reverse myself around and pay the penalty. But that's okay, because this is a sufficiently valuable video, and I have to prove myself sufficiently resilient, albeit sometimes a dumbass. I am the first to admit that I can be a dumbass. Things like missing exits while I get into shooting a video while I'm talking while driving. You gotta remember your first priority is driving. You've gotta pay attention to what you're doing, or else you end up in situations like this. Now, I'll be able to look at this years hence and look back and laugh. However, right now it's feeling quite serious, so I'm working hard to keep this video going because I don't like to edit. And, maybe this will be one of those slice of life pieces to remind me. I'll nickname it. You remember that time. And so long as it all turns out just fine, there's no problem with that. And I have done this before, and I do have a notion of how to correct myself. It has to do with pulling off at the very tourist Delaware Valley water gap. Delaware water gap. Delaware River. It's not Delaware. So I get these names confused. But it's the Delaware water gap, where there's a lot of tourism and recreational activity. It's really awesome on both the Pennsylvania and the New Jersey side, which I just happen to now be on. Sufficiently so that immediately after crossing over the Delaware, like I just did, like a dumbass, I am able to pull off onto a not much used exit, so it's a little bit snowy, so I'm going to be going extra slow now. I am not in four-wheel drive on my Jeep, so I have to take particular caution. Turning around, which, if I remember correctly, it may be an underpass here that will just bring me on back onto I-80 in the other direction. Meanwhile, my peeps, my pack, are waiting for me back at the fort with all the treats I come bearing, right down to the crickets driving conditions are, in fact, going to be a challenge on this particular day. And in fact, I see a text coming in, which is probably along the lines to that effect. Yeah, it's the ETA question. So what my plan is to get back home quick as a bunny, distribute out the goodies that I bring, get the switched. Talking about switches, easy, smooth transitions. Smooth transitions, easy recovery, having tasks in your event loop that are very sharp and on top of things, running at more frequent cycles than I had just allowed it to occur. And on those occurrences, when things do get out of control and the unexpected occurs, then you can recognize it quickly, gracefully adapt, even though it might cost you a little money driving in and out of Jersey. You don't have to pay anything to enter Jersey, but if you want to get out, you gotta pay money. You gotta pay to leave. So don't go completely broke in Jersey, or else you're stuck in Jersey, is what I'm trying to tell you. The Delaware River is beautiful. It appears actually even frozen over. The things outside my window here in the mountains are quite a delight to experience. However, I won't particularly be showing them to you because, once again, I am driving. So, the video that's uploading in the background has to do with switching hardware and how to not excessively fall in love with any particular instance of hardware because your heart will be broken. Instead, what you do is you allow yourself to fall in love with a platform that is easily reproduced and run on popular virtualization layers. x86 with some decent graphics capability is surely one of them. The same with ARM and similar some graphics fanciness, similar to a Raspberry Pi. So you've got a unit of computing power. A new one that's coming about to be is ARM64. That's stuff which can run on a decently equipped ARM64, laptop or a tablet or whatever. So you got these platform profiles that are generally generic in nature, so long as your software is not written exclusively for that hardware platform. So, that's all of gaming, and that's all of mobile application development. All that stuff is written for a particular hardware platform that's popular and sold a lot, and is in the public's mind, and has a decent marketplace, so the people who develop software can make money on their work. So it has like an app store and iTunes. Apple, again, is the one that innovates on this front. But also, it seems that Google and Android are sufficient to make things profitable in the Play Store. So there can be a second runner-up in mobile, and your development platform is highly proprietary in each case. Languages of the past, such as Java and Android, or highly proprietary stuff such as Swift or Objective-C for iOS. And that's been a sufficient deterrent to keep me from targeting Apple platforms for many years, a decade plus, it seems to be. And so, in my repertoire, there's not really a perfect solution to mobile, especially locally running, taking advantage of the local platform resources, application development, being Python predisposed, such as I am. So there's some possibilities, and I'm not sufficiently motivated to look into them because they seem a little hackish to me. And I stay away from the hackish areas, which leads to the fact which, if you're doing native development work, do native development work. Use Java on Android, use Swift on Apple, or Objective-C on Apple. And, yield to the strength of the platform. Which leads us to sub-platforms like the web as a sub-platform on every major platform. Almost everything has a web browser, and those web browsers have decent Java script language interpreters. JavaScript, virtual machines running in tabs, the way Chrome innovated. And then the V8 engine, this JavaScript rendering engine or execution engine, is like an interpreter world. You feed JavaScript to this V8 interpreter, it runs, and sometimes it has to do with control of the object, the device it's embedded into, which is the browser. So JavaScript really exists because, they needed a language to plug into the browser. Seems JavaScript is convenient, and it's now been extracted and made available for server use with this component called Node.js that uses the same, now renamed, but originally V8 rendering engine, and it's quite popular, and it allows JavaScript to be used for many things, and it does indeed solve certain problems like mobile development. You just target the web sub-platform. There's so many ways that things that are designed to run on the web can also run on mobile as your place you're running it. You just add internet, and a lot takes place on the server. And more stuff can take place locally because there's protocols coming out that let you do very application type stuff running in the browser under HTML5, under JavaScript as a language that can always run in the browser context. There's really a lot that's possible with that as your platform. But if you choose as your platform as you do Python, because of a better 80-20 rule sweet spot than even the web, being allowing you to be expressive very naturally with very little extra overhead and syntax, if you buy into that and you buy into the notion, as I do, that Python is the new lingua franca of tech, then you have a mobile app native deficiency and have to say, that's okay, I'll find that other ways. And one of those other ways will inevitably be something close to native vanilla JavaScript at very least. You should know, because it's so important in technology today. If you object to it as a primary programming language that you think in, the way purists would do, of which Python people are not true purists. Ruby people are purists, pure object-oriented. Python people are pragmatic solution people. So if JavaScript does certain jobs better, just yield to it and interact with JavaScript in any number of ways, from JavaScript and Python sharing very close to objects in memory notation. In their text format, they manifest as JSON files on the JavaScript side, and they manifest as, string representations using curly brackets, and the identical syntax nearly to JSON on the Python side. So you've got a lot of interoperability there. You could always back-end your stuff with SQLite, which gives you interoperability with data. If you want other types of interoperability, you can pass, one can invoke the other using how every language has a way to run batch native commands. So if you can run native commands, you can run native script files or batch files. And if you can run native script or batch files, you can make references to programs you wrote in other languages that you gave a command line interface, that you designed the API for, using one of the many conventions that are out there. Usually these days, the common Unix command line line conventions with a lot of single hyphen letter followed by some data, or optionally double hyphen word. See, the short version is a shortcut, and the long version is the verbose version that uses the words. So if you want help on a command, you do -H after the command. So command space -H. If you want the help on the command, you can also do command space -- the word help. And this starts laying the groundwork for the command line interface designed by Ken Thompson back in the late 60s and early 70s when Unix came out, which was copied by many other systems, but not to the full degree that, say, Linux did, where Linux is command compatible with Unix. DOS, the system underlying x86, is not command compatible with Unix, for the very least of which is that it uses backslashes instead of forward slashes and paths. It's unbelievably stupid. However, because backslashes were used where the minuses were used for command line parameters, because DOS used backslash letter to signify command line switches, they could not use it in directory structures because directories came out after DOS. Ugh. I can't believe I even remember or know this stuff. But DOS came out, it was a flat directory system. Directories were an innovation, but before the directory innovation came along, backslashes were used for command line switches, arguments to commands. And so they were reserved and couldn't be used in paths. So paths had to use, it was the forward slash that was used. Forward slash was used in the command lines, so backslash had to be used in paths. I almost got that backwards, but you see what I mean? DOS was cornered into using backslashes for paths to files and directories in their file system, or else they would not be backwards compatible with DOS. And so there was the great big split there, and that causes all sorts of headache and grief today. But if you either just use Unix/Linux, you don't have to deal with that grief. But Microsoft won't have that, so they're trying to keep you on the Windows 10 platform and giving you a Linux subsystem where everything just uses the forward slash system, and you can be happy like every other developer using Linux out there and have Windows in your life. It's a pleasant world because you have the power of proprietary trying to get you to buy their stuff and use their things, but you also have the power of a free and open source API, so you're not being cornered into being a Microsoft person. The dependencies are loosely coupled at this operating system level where they say, you got two choices. You either say, just pretend it's Linux, because even Windows can run like Linux. Macs runs like Unix, which Linux is running like. So everyone can just agree, use a Unix-like operating system. That's pretty reliable these days. Or you can be a good boy or girl and use the path objects, which will always do the translation between the native path slash system of the operating system and a agreed upon convention, which is forward slashes, but not direct forward slash access to the operating system as if you were passing the command through, but even the forward slashes get parsed to make sure that the operating system is in fact doing the right thing. So you use a lot of path objects, and by using path objects you have operating system independence, and you don't have to deal with forward or backslashes as a true part of a file system at all. They're just part of a higher level abstraction that all agrees on forward slashes. So even on Windows systems you're using forward slashes essentially. So where does that leave us? I'm on the final approach home, and I really will have to wrap up this video promptly because there will be a lot of demands on my attention. Pleasant all around. I really love it. I'm bringing treats right down to crickets for our lizard, for our leopard gecko, lots of chocolate amongst what I have, and it'll be well received. And I gotta get myself transitioned. I was talking a lot about transitions. Transitions are indeed important. No matter how warm and cozy serotonin producing your childhood was, and the things you got familiar with and fell in love with in a purist and idealist state, you will find that the world is riddled with compromise that you must accept. That you can't be concerned with the purity of things behind the black box of a system. Systems are what systems are, and every system is valid if it gets the work done. Where your focus should be on is where your long-term loyalties to APIs, to application program interfaces, and the languages that come with it. Because don't misunderstand. You're not just passing JSON objects back and forth all the time, hence your obsolescence proof and future proof. No. That only means you've got one of many data structures you can rely on over time, others including CSV files and SQLite text files. So you got plenty of data interoperability opportunity. What you have to be concerned with is how you express yourself all the time, either when you're in experimental ad hoc development phase, where you're experimenting with things and have a lot of things, say, persistent in memory, so you can continue to read their memory state and do further and further transitions until you've got your process done. In other words, the way Jupyter Notebook, and before that IPython, now renamed Jupyter Notebook, so that it does not have an excessive language bias, which it had when it was IPython, but it ran R code just as well. So the company behind IPython, they've really rebranded it all to Jupyter so that it's a generic notebook engine. You've got this read, eval, print loop, a REPL environment where things are always running. It makes the event loop and concurrent programming a little wacky, which makes Puppeteer running under a Jupyter Notebook a little wacky, which brings this conversation full circle. Even a Python person occasionally needs to venture into JavaScript. And you can think about it the way you think of other languages that you just need to bite the bullet and learn, i.e. regex, regular expression pattern matching, and many other sub-languages, on occasion awk. You'll see that awk, and certainly sed, the stream editor, have not gone away. They're in the Unix land. They're part of the Unix/Linux pipe things around way of doing things, where everything can be represented as an object in a file system, so you can pass information between systems, hardware subsystems that have been abstracted in software, through the consistent API or language of piping information from one command into another. Hence, Unix/Linux really is something special. It's not just another text interface to computers. It's one that prescribes a whole way of moving data around, that you can make a whole automated system with nothing more than script commands that say, do this in Unix, then do that in Unix, then do that in Unix. Poof, you're magically transforming data between systems, where the magic, the incantations are made with this wonderful interoperability language in the middle that doesn't really matter what hardware it's running on, because Unix can be compiled to run on anything as the native operating system, along with Linux and those variations that can assure you of a certain number of things that generally fall under these "this is Unix" compliance rules, POSIX being the most popular but not the best one, because POSIX recommends a particular software distribution system, Red Hat's version, which is not what some of the most popular distributions use, which is Debian. So anyway, there's so many sub-discussions here, but it gets back to the point that sometimes in tech, you just got to hold your nose and learn another language. Now, you don't have to learn it for web development the way so many people in the JavaScript full web stack development culture do, but rather you can learn it in, hey, let me just use the native Puppeteer so I don't have to use Puppeteer way. And, JavaScript becomes your gateway to browser automation, which is important for so many reasons today. In scripts that you need to run that automate things, how many times do you need to make that automation include firing up a web browser, logging into a site, going to such and such a place, setting the parameter so and so, downloading something, taking that resulting file and making it a part of a larger process? Well, the answer is a lot. And these things tend to live in Jupyter Notebooks initially, but they resist it because Puppeteer is not native Puppeteer. Under the Google distributed Puppeteer library for automating Chrome, under Node.js, under a command line shell. So, you don't have to be a web developer. You don't have to install Nginx or learn, become a WordPress person and have to, endure PHP. You don't have to do many of these things. You don't have to have a web server in the picture or even a database many times if you get comfortable with a native language that brings enough of these parts to the table that they can be rapidly strung together sufficiently so that you can say your language is your framework, your language doesn't trip you up on syntax, your language doesn't inherit long, laundry lists of luggage dependencies because, it was trying to get the comp sci cool kids to come on board. Your language is pure in the, let's get some work done sense, but your language is readily compromised in, hey, let's yield to the way Unix/Linux does things, and let's yield to the way system administrators, who are one of the main customers of script files, like to do things. So there's a lot of editing of text files. There's a lot of using the text file of your text file editor or IDE of your choice. There's a lot of, sort of getting out of your way and stripping out as much excess code that you need to look at. And then there's this getting into the zone of being able to write code, free-flowingly in this format. And generally what you're doing now is you're writing command lines commands. You're writing JavaScript or Python code that will run like Unix or Linux commands from the command line so that you can save out text files and automate processes and automate Chrome, web browser, and just automate things all over the place and string it together in highly reliable scripts, automated processes to bring actionable deliverables so that stakeholders can make better decisions. And that's kind of the whole data mastering thing I've been doing lately. It flows very naturally out of my field of SEO and yada yada. How'd I get to this point? It's time for me to wrap up and say, hey, thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you again soon. And don't forget to subscribe.